Well, the calendar is reset, fresh snow is on the ground, and the Steelers' playoff collapse is inevitable, which means it's time for my top 25 coasters. 2024 was an awesome year from the coaster standpoint. My coaster count went from 39 to 88, but mostly, I was able to spend a lot of time at parks with friends both old and new. Enough with the nostalgia, let's just jump right into it. '25 is, well, Wonderland's Mindbuster? Really? Well, okay, first things first, I don't just have a tolerance for rough coasters. In some cases, especially this one, I actually enjoy it. Mindbuster just feels like a minute-long car crash in the best way. There's a certain aggressiveness few other coasters match. Even if there are only two airtime moments, and to be honest, the section between the turnaround and helix kinda blows, Mindbuster still shines thanks to its first half and finale. It also has a great night ride, especially during con. Number 24 is Kings Island's Adventure Express. Let's get the elephant out of the room first. When you know what's coming, the finale doesn't really disappoint. In fact, I found it rather hilarious. Now let's address the smaller elephants. AdX has a really good, out-of-control feeling that's pretty rare for steel coasters, especially during that night ride. The laterals are sudden, intense, and drawn out. The theming is well done, too. This might be labeled as a family coaster by some, but that's a deceptive label. Aero really worked wonders with this layout. Next up is Wonderland's Yukon Striker. Yukon really packs a punch, with some great forces in the inversions. The 0G winder gives funky laterals in hang time, specifically in the back right seat. The loop and second moment rival forces found on B&M inverts. And, of course, not to mention that drop. 245 feet of floaty, free-fall goodness. The problem is that it's just a little short for my liking, more or less ending at the mid-course. Kumba at Busch Gardens Tampa slots in at number 22. The quick caveat here is that I only got a single mid-row ride on it. I just can't justify putting it higher until I get back. Its 7 inversions all have good force to them, and the layout in general is filled with those sweet, snappy transitions. The first 3 in particular, the loop, dive loop, and 0G roll, all really stand out. Kumba was truly ahead of its time. Next up is Copperhead Strike at Carowinds. For whatever reason, I don't like this ride as much as I probably should. The layout is packed with pops of ejector airtime, laterals, and positives, mixed with some serious hang time on those inversions. That JoJo roll right out of the station is phenomenal, and the single dive has some great whip. Also, the theming is truly above and beyond for a regional park, especially that pre-launch sequence. I wish it was a little more intense though. Number 20 is Ravine at Holiday World. This park is filled with great woodies, and unfortunately, Ravine's just a little lost in the fold. By no means is it a bad ride though. The first drop is excellent, while that swooping turn over the water is both scenic and lateral filled. And then there's that one drop into the woods. If you've ridden this, you know what I'm talking about. It's loaded with some of the best airtime out there. Some say this ride is short, but I think it's a complete ride. It's sad that it was overshadowed on my visit to Holiday World, but I will get more laps upon my return. Number 19 is Ride of Steel at Darien Lake, the creatively named hypercoaster. I wasn't able to get back to this park this year, but, well, I really don't think this is suffering from a lack of recency bias, unlike some other coasters. The layout just has some really poor moments, such as the drawn-out helices or the straight track. With that said, every airtime hill is really damn good. Those final 3 airtime hills really bring the power, and the hill right after the straight track is one of the best out there altogether. All in all, maybe it's not without its flaws, but Ride of Steel serves pretty well as Darien Lake's headliner. Number 18 is Orion at Kings Island. This is the first of a quartet of Giga coasters on this list. It's also another coaster I should probably like more than I do. The layout is well rounded, with the drop, speed hill, and final off-bank hill really standing out. Unlike other Gigas, there's really no weak spot. I even think the wave turn's a little underrated. The theming, which impressively includes a pre-show and a soundtrack, is a beautiful touch. With that said, I think it's fair to say Orion should have stuck a little closer to the ground than it does. Making it in at number 17 is the Beast at Kings Island. This might be the dumbest ride ever built, and that led to the best possible outcome. The night ride, especially, is an experience unlike any other. The first half of the layout is bizarre, where it feels like an out-of-control mine train, with great laterals. Then there's that final helix in the second half. The shallow drop feels like a descent into madness, with the helix crushing you into the side of the train for what feels like an eternity. It's crazy how a ride built almost half a century ago, all in-house, holds up this well. Vortex at Canada's Wonderland is on the shortlist for being the most underrated coaster I've ridden. Standing at a deceptively short 91 feet, it has the best pacing of any coaster in the park. Force-wise, every swing gives good positives, and that one helix is straight up pounding. That's paired with diving off of a mountain, and awesome interactions with water plus a trio of coasters. Despite being a little short, Vortex is a standout and an easy winner at Wonderland. If you're crazy like me, and you happen to enjoy the sensation of a bare metal rod stabbing you in your thighs, you will love Magnum XL200 at Cedar Point. Those triangular airtime hills are legendary, and live up to every inch of the hype. And there's a lot of them. To be blunt, it's the strongest airtime I've experienced. This is perhaps the only ride that would be made boring by a redesign. It's nearly impossible to finish a lap without thinking, how is that legal? Magnum is a marathon away from skyrocketing up this list. Next up is the original Giga Coaster, Millennium Force at Cedar Point. Is there a more internally conflicting ride? We all can't deny the beauty of this thing. From the structure, to the trains, to the music playing in the station, Millie is just a great coaster to be around. On the ride, the drop stands out all these years later, while the sheer speed is glorious. Does this make up for a ride with kind of weak forces and intensity? I say yes, to a degree. The 14th spot is a happy medium. It's hard for Millennium Force to vault over the more intense rides ahead of it, but it holds its own in other ways. The last of a triumvirate of consecutive Cedar Point coasters is Raptor. My craving for intensity just vaults this ahead of Millennium Force and Magnum. The positive forces are good, although a little overrated. Instead, Raptor's defining feature is its whip. From the first drop to the final transition, it feels like a mechanical bull. The layout is full of strong lateral snaps, especially in the Cobra roll, which is easily my favorite moment on the ride. There may be some awkward straight track moments, but they only build anticipation in the back row, as there's no way to see where you're going. Between the consistent intensity and long layout, Raptor is a borderline elite coaster. Another B&M invert comes in at number 12, and that's Banshee at Kings Island. This ride just has a masterclass of a layout, That only gets better as it goes on. Every valley gives folding force, and it's complemented by a substantial rattle, which only highlights the intensity. And right when you think it's done, it throws you into this beautiful hang-time-filled roll, and the final pummeling helix. Also, kudos to Kings Island once again for the theming. The station and keel have this distinctive horror theme, while that scream at the top of the lift hill is nothing short of a chef's kiss. It's also the sound effect I'm using to introduce every coaster. I can confidently say this coaster has the best logo out there, and I'm not sure that's close. But that doesn't really help the ride experience. The third Giga Coaster on this list is Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland. I'll be completely honest here. I don't love this ride as much as I did a year ago. That first half is still otherworldly. The sequence of drop, overbank, speed hill, and camelback is among the best on this list. With that said, I can accept that the second half is really weak, with the really good camelback being the only noteworthy element. The intensity of the first half also seems inconsistent. Some days, there's awesome positive forces and ejector airtime on the speed hill. On others, it just falls a little flat. Overall, the discrepancy is enough for me to admit Leviathan is no longer the best coaster in the park. Don't get me wrong though, this ride absolutely slaps, and I can totally see why it would be your favorite in the park. Number 10 is the fourth of 4 straight B&Ms on this list, Kings Island's Diamondback. It's almost perfect. Almost. There are a lot of awesome things about it. There's that great layout snaking through the woods. It's also a sustained airtime machine. The trains are awesome too, and the ride will add some nice intensity. Plus, the final splashdown is one of the prettiest moments on the coaster. If the finale hit harder, Diamondback would be even higher. Alas, the lack of consistency throughout the entire layout does hold it back slightly. Shed enjoyers rise up. Number 9 is Mystic Timbers, also at Kings Island. In my opinion, it's the best coaster in this park, thanks to that elite stretch from the first drop to the turnaround. The sheer pacing on this masterpiece is truly something to behold. Its hills all give some phenomenal floater airtime, only for sharp laterals to interrupt, and you don't take any breaks. As is common at Kings Island, there's also good theming between the soundtrack, lift hill audio, entrance plaza, and of course, the shed. Similarly to Diamondback, I just wish the consistency was a little better, as the airtime does weaken in the second half. Regardless, thankfully, it does keep its pacing the whole way through. Next up is Behemoth. I want to note that my top 8 coasters stand a solid notch above the rest. Aside from a nitpick or two, pretty much all these rides are perfect. However, in my weird opinion, I do think that there are degrees to perfection. The first of these elite coasters is again Behemoth. By far my most ridden coaster this past year, it is the best ride at my home park. This brilliant B&M Hyper thrives in its simplicity. Its basic layout features nothing aside from a linear formation of camelbacks, all of which give great floater airtime. For good measure, Behemoth also has really good positives in its helix and hammerhead, as well as pretty much all its valleys. The setting, over a pond with views of Toronto's enormous skyline, make a great ride even better. Predictably, this is my go-to marathon. I had 56 rides in a day this past year. Number 7 is the Phantom's Revenge at Kennywood. The Pride of Pittsburgh carries an interesting backstory, starting life as an aero-megalooper before being transformed by Morgan. The result is a glorious mix of drawn-out hyper-elements and demented, peerless ejector airtime. Sweet speed and positive forces are also thrown in. Pound for pound, it is the best ejector airtime of any coaster on this list. That lap bar is basically a pool noodle. Phantoms is on the shorter side, but it really doesn't matter. The biggest downside is a lack of recency bias, as I was unable to return to the park in 2024. Next up is Maverick at Cedar Point. Jack of all trades. Few phrases can describe this coaster any better. Months after a 10-ride marathon, it's hard to get over just how good its elements are. Everything feels forceful, some with the power of a Mike Tyson punch. Those snappy turns, the second launch, either airtime hill, and those final stingle dives set this thing apart. Maverick does nothing short of bringing it, with a versatile, long layout. So far, this has been my only experience of seeing Intamin at their very best. It's crazy to think about just how much better this might have been with that Heartline roll. Leading off the top 5 is Ravine Flyer 2 at Waldameer. Some seem to say Ravine Flyer 2 struggles in its second half. However, I'm here to assure you with 2 words. So what? The first half is so good that it could have gone right to the final breaks and still found a spot in this top 10. There's something about the pacing and flow of a gravity group coaster that no one else seems to replicate. Airtime and laterals are just mixed perfectly. Time of day also makes a big difference, as dead spots in the second half turn into fun airtime moments later in the day. Maybe it's a little two-faced, but Ravine Flyer 2 is an absolutely elite Woody. The second Holiday World Woody on this list is Legend at the number 4 spot. I'll be honest here, I was not expecting Legend to crack my top 10, but the night rides I got assured otherwise. They might have been the 2 best individual rides I've ever had on a coaster. Every turn is absolutely folding. There's an art in creating perfect laterals. Legend does it. They're strong, sustained, and ridiculously intense. Most importantly, given the long ride time, they're seemingly endless. The location also puts it all together. There's only one real airtime moment, but it doesn't need any more anyways. Not every ride can be a night ride, but it would be a disservice to put this any lower. Now we've got this list's one and only RMC, and that is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. Though the preceding rides are elite, these final 3 still manage to stand out among them. The first of these is Steel Vengeance. The best way to describe it is as an endless array of airtime hills. In fact, I think that might be the only way to describe it. The first 2 hills also throw in nice laterals, and every inversion has a nice float to it. Aside from that, there's no variety, only violence. The train just acts as if it does not want you on the seat, working to throw you off for a solid 70 seconds. This ride holds the world record for having the most airtime on a coaster, with the whopping 24 airtime moments. Alas, the 2 coasters topping it are simply a little more well-rounded. The penultimate coaster on this list is Fury 325 at Carowinds, which puts the other Gigas I've ridden to shame. And the first drop is basically on par with Orion and Leviathan. After that, it feels like riding a rocket. The first half's turns bring that perfect mix of speed, intensity, and positive forces. The climax comes with the treble clef, where the best positives of the ride come on the ascent, and you get some great floater on the way down. The second half features a trio of camelbacks, which all pop with flow-ejector airtime. Fury is a complete ride. There are a couple mediocre moments in the middle, but who cares? The layout is otherwise B&M's best, and makes me wonder what they could do with an unlimited budget again. My current number 1 coaster is Voyage at Holiday World. Some rides may have more track, but even those don't have 100 seconds of ride time, like Voyage does. There's a triumvirate of distinctive sections, each with their own flavor. The first run of hills after the drop feels like a hypercoaster. The second feels like your classic twister, and then the final is where Voyage puts it all together. mixing those sweet lateral fill turns with great airtime hills. Voyage keeps its speed and pacing the whole way through while using the terrain brilliantly. It's so long and intense that it feels like you're fighting it. This ride is truly remarkable. And that's it for the list. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, feel free to like and subscribe. Or if you disliked, feel free to add a hateful comment.